You think earthquakes just happen, random tremors? Bad luck. But the ground beneath your feet follows a pattern written in rock for millions of years. 7 zones on this planet hold more destructive power than every bomb ever built combined. These aren't random cracks in the earth. These are the deadliest plate boundaries humanity has ever faced, places where tens of thousands die in minutes, where entire coastlines drop into the sea, where cities built over centuries collapse before breakfast. Which boundaries have killed the most? What makes them so lethal? And why do millions still live directly on top of them? 15 major tectonic plates drift at the speed your fingernails grow. Where they meet, they grind. They lock. They release the centuries of built-up energy in seconds. The strongest earthquakes recorded all come from one type of boundary. Subduction zones, where one plate dives beneath another. These zones can produce earthquakes above magnitude 9.0. They generate tsunamis that cross oceans. They've killed more people in the last century than all volcanic eruptions combined. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the United States Geological Survey's Preliminary Determination of Epicenters Database, the National Geophysical Data Centers, Significant Earthquake Database, peer-reviewed studies published in Nature Geoscience and the Geological Society of America, and historical records from the Japan Meteorological Agency dating back to 600 CE. These aren't generic sources. These are the actual seismic monitoring stations and scientific institutions that track every tremor on the planet. Now back to the information. 5,500 kilometers of fault stretching from Myanmar through Sumatra to Java, the longest active subduction zone on Earth, where the Indo-Australian plate dives beneath the Eurasian plate at 7 to 9 centimeters per year. This boundary killed more people in a single day than any earthquake in modern history. The rupture lasted 10 minutes, 10 full minutes of the seafloor tearing apart. 1,200 kilometers of fault broke in sequence. The hanging wall thrust upward by 6 to 10 meters in places, 20 meters horizontal displacement. The energy released equaled 475 megatons of TNT, over 23,000 Hiroshima bombs. The rupture propagated at 3 kilometers per second, a tsunami wave moving at 800 kilometers per hour, 30 meters high in some locations. The wave hit 14 countries: Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Malaysia, Maldives, Seychelles, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, even reaching Strisby at the southern tip of Africa. 230,000 people died, most drowned. The official count from the Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters lists 227,000. 898 confirmed deaths, another 1.7 million displaced. Entire coastal villages in Aceh province disappeared. The city of Banda Aceh lost 90,000 residents. In Hilo Bay, Hawaii, 10,000 kilometers from the epicenter, waves still measured 10.6 meters. The tsunami reached Japan 22 hours after the quake. No local warning. Japanese historical records show a wave hit Honshu with no preceding earthquake felt in Japan itself. This became known as the Orphan Tsunami that eventually helped scientists discover evidence of past Cascadia earthquakes, but we're not there yet. The Sunda megathrust has a documented history. Geological evidence shows great earthquakes with 200-year intervals. Coral microatolls on the Mentawai Islands record uplift and subsidence from past events. The fault last produced comparable magnitude, 9 events in 1797 and 1833, according to paleoseismic studies by researchers at Caltech's Seismological Laboratory. These ancient ruptures measured through coral growth rings and sediment cores. The corals stop growing when coastal land suddenly drops or rises during megathrust earthquakes. Tree rings frozen in time underwater. 3 months after the Boxing Day quake, March 28, 2005, another magnitude 8.7 event ruptured 350 kilometers south. The aftershock sequence continued for years. GPS stations recorded aseismic afterslip equivalent to a magnitude 8.2 earthquake 11 months after the main shock. The accumulated pressure in certain segments remains. Researchers publishing in Natural Hazards in February 2023 identified a major seismic gap south of West Java and southeast Sumatra, a segment that hasn't ruptured in centuries. When it goes, models predict tsunami waves reaching 7 meters hitting the coast 26 minutes after rupture. Painan, West Sumatra, faces complete inundation. Waiting for the next release. Responsible for the most expensive natural disaster in recorded history. Epicenter 72 kilometers east of the Oshika Peninsula, depth 32 kilometers. The rupture zone measured 500 kilometers long by 200 kilometers wide. Peak slip exceeded 50 meters near the trench. The entire island of Honshu shifted 2.4 meters east. The earthquake lasted 6 minutes. 6 minutes of continuous shaking felt as far as Beijing, China. Then 8.8, then 8.9, finally 9.0. The revision took hours. Nobody expected this size earthquake on the Japan Trench. Historical records going back 450 years showed no comparable event in this segment. The maximum credible earthquake was thought to be magnitude 8.3. Scientists were wrong. The tsunami arrived within 30 minutes along the Tohoku coast. Waves reached 40.5 meters in Miyako, Iwate Prefecture. In Sendai, the water traveled 10 kilometers inland at 700 kilometers per hour. Residents had 8 to 10 minutes of warning. 100 evacuation sites were washed away. The official death toll from the Japan National Police Agency as of March 2021 lists 15,899 confirmed. Deaths: 2,526 missing, presumed dead. 6,157 injured. Nearly all fatalities resulted from drowning in the tsunami. 98% of damage came from the wave, not the shaking. 300,000 buildings destroyed or damaged. 123,000 completely destroyed. 283,000 severely damaged. 740,000 partially damaged. 4,200 road sites damaged. 116 bridges. 29 railway locations. The economic cost reached 220 billion USD, according to the World Bank. Some estimates put it higher at 300 billion. The costliest natural disaster ever recorded. Insurance losses alone totaled 35 billion. Units 1, 2, and 3 scrammed automatically when the shaking started. Control rods inserted, fission stopped, then the wave hit. 14-meter tsunami. The plant was designed for 5.7 meters. External power lost. Diesel generators flooded. No cooling. 3 reactor cores largely melted within 3 days. Hydrogen explosions. Radiation release. The worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl 1986. 150,000 people evacuated. The exclusion zone remains. The previous comparable event occurred in 869 CE, the Jogan earthquake, estimated magnitude 8.4 or higher. Historical texts describe the wave inundating the same coastal areas. The recurrence interval sits between 800 and 1100 years. 2011 was on schedule. The segment south of Tohoku toward Tokyo remains unbroken. Stress transfer calculations show increased pressure. If that section breaks in a similar magnitude, 9 event closer to the capital, the death toll could be catastrophic. Tokyo metro area holds 38 million people. The government updated building codes, raised seawalls, but the new walls still wouldn't have been high enough to stop the 2011 tsunami. 8 to 9 centimeters per year. Every year that passes without rupture means more energy stored, more displacement waiting to release. The next one will come. The question is when and where. 5,900 kilometers of subduction zone. The Nazca Plate diving beneath South America at 7 to 9 centimeters per year. This boundary produced the largest earthquake ever recorded by instruments. 1511 local time, Valdivia, Chile, magnitude 9.5, the strongest earthquake in documented history. The rupture zone stretched between 800 and 1,000 kilometers. From Morocco at 37 degrees south to below the Chiloé archipelago at 44 degrees south. The fault slipped for 10 to 13 minutes, average slip 11 meters, peak slip 25 to 30 meters in the offshore segments. Rupture velocity 3.5 kilometers per second. A third of buildings in Conception collapsed. President Jorge Alessandri canceled Battle of Iquique memorial festivities to coordinate emergency response. Then, 15 minutes after magnitude 7.8 aftershock on May 22nd, the main event began. The ground shook for over 10 minutes. Valdivia's port at Corral saw water levels rise 4 meters before receding. Then, at 1620, a wave 8 meters high struck the Chilean coast between Conception and Chiloé. 10 minutes later, another wave measuring 10 meters hit. Puerto Montt experienced massive subsidence. Entire shorelines permanently altered. Marine navigation charts became useless. The cities of Valdivia and Puerto Montt lost basic infrastructure. Electricity gone. Water systems destroyed. 20,000 people homeless in Valdivia alone. 2 million people homeless total across Chile. Official death toll 1,655 in Chile. Early estimates ranged into the thousands, but were revised down. 3,000 injured. 61 people died, 282 injured, 500 homes and businesses destroyed in downtown Hilo, $75 million damage in 1960 money. 22 hours after the quake, the wave struck Japan. 138 people killed, 32 died in the Philippines. New Zealand recorded waves, Australia, the Aleutian Islands. The tsunami was the first globally recorded by tide gauges across multiple ocean basins. 2 days later, May 24th, the Cordon volcano erupted. 4 decades of dormancy ended. The volcano sits in the Andes near the rupture zone. Seismologists believe the stress change from the earthquake triggered the eruption. It continued for 59 days until July 22nd. This demonstrated a link between megathrust earthquakes and volcanic activity. The weight redistribution from meters of vertical displacement can uncork magma chambers. The Peru-Chile Trench has a history of massive earthquakes. Magnitude 8 events occur regularly. The segment near Valdivia produces great earthquakes, roughly every century to century and a half, based on historical records and geological evidence. But magnitude 9.5 represents something extreme. A 2016 study in Nature found that a secondary strike slip component along the Liquiñe-Ofquay fault contributed a magnitude 9.07 sub-event. The main thrust measured magnitude 9.37. Combined, they created the monster. The death toll could have been orders of magnitude higher. Compare to Haiti's magnitude 7.0 earthquake the same year. 220,000 dead in Haiti, 500 in Chile, despite stronger shaking. Seismic design codes saved lives. The UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction confirmed this in 2011. Chile's buildings held. Northern Chile, near the Bolivia border, central Chile near Santiago, southern Chile near Valdivia. Each section has its own earthquake cycle. Each is capable of magnitude 8 or larger. The entire plate boundary represents a continuous threat to the 40 million people living along Chile's coast, where the Juan de Fuca, Explorer, and Gorda plates subduct beneath North America. This boundary is different, eerily quiet. No small earthquakes, almost no seismicity. A locked zone building pressure for over 3 centuries. January 26, 1700. 2100 hours Pacific Standard Time. Magnitude 9.0. The entire fault ruptured at once, from British Columbia to Northern California. The plate slipped an average of 20 meters. The coastline dropped up to 2 meters instantly. Dry forest became tidal mudflat. Red cedar trees died where they stood. Their outermost growth rings formed in 1699, the last growing season before the tsunami. These ghost forests now stand as evidence, some inland along the Copalis River in Washington, others under the ocean surface, visible only at low tide. Oral traditions from the Hu, Ayat, Maka, Ho, Quileute, Yurok, and Duwamish describe earthquakes and floods. Stories of battles between thunderbirds and whales. The earth shook, the ocean rose, villages were destroyed. Entire communities relocated to higher ground. The traditions were dismissed as mythology until the science caught up. But on January 27, 1700, at midnight, a wave struck the coast of Honshu, 16 feet high. The Japanese recorded it in annals dating back to 600 CE. They called it an orphan tsunami. No parent earthquake observed. For 297 years it remained a mystery. Then, in 1996, seismologist Kenji Satake connected the dots. The timing matched. 10 hours for a tsunami to travel from Cascadia to Japan. The date converted from the Japanese Genroku calendar to the modern calendar. January 27th, 1700. Japanese time equals January 26th, 1700, 2100 hours Pacific time. The Cascadia earthquake caused Japan's orphan tsunami. Layers of sand from tsunami inundation, multiple events visible in the stratigraphy, radiocarbon dating, dendrochronology, turbidite cores from the ocean floor showing submarine landslides, all pointing to the same conclusion. Cascadia produces magnitude 9 earthquakes, and they recur. Average 570 to 590 years. Some events rupture the entire zone, others break in segments. Southern Cascadia from Cape Mendocino to Newport, Oregon, historically, ruptures more frequently than the northern section. But when the full fault breaks, magnitude 9.0. Tacoma, coastal towns throughout Washington, Oregon, Northern California, and British Columbia. A 2016 Cascadia Rising exercise scenario estimated outcomes. Magnitude 9.0 rupture. Deaths in the thousands. 440,000 residential buildings damaged in Oregon alone. 500,000 in Washington. Roads severed. Bridges down. No electricity for months. Tsunami inundation maps show water 10 kilometers inland in some valleys. Seaside, Oregon faces over 4,000 casualties in one simulation. 20,000 at risk of toxic inhalation from fuel releases in Seattle's industrial areas. 325 years have passed since 1700. 13 meters of slip deficit has accumulated. A 2010 study predicted 37% chance of magnitude, 8.2 or greater within 50 years. 10 to 15% chance of magnitude 9 or greater. Recent research in April 2025, published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, reveals worse news. When the earthquake hits, entire coastal shorelines will drop by up to 2 meters, permanent subsidence, Areas currently above sea level will become tidal zones immediately. Combined with accelerating sea level rise from climate change, coastal communities faced permanent flooding even before considering tsunami damage. The Pacific Northwest is not prepared. Most buildings predate modern seismic codes. Unreinforced masonry throughout downtown Seattle and Portland, vulnerable bridges. The region could experience 5 minutes of violent shaking. Magnitude 9 earthquakes don't stop after 30 seconds. They keep going. Concrete fatigues, steel bends, buildings that survive the first minute collapse in the fourth. Turkey sits on the Anatolian microplate, squeezed between the Eurasian plate to the north and the Arabian plate to the south. 2 major strike-slip faults bound this plate. The North Anatolian Fault runs 1,200 to 1,500 kilometers from the Karlova Triple Junction to the Aegean Sea, 20 kilometers south of Istanbul. The East Anatolian Fault extends hundreds of kilometers along Turkey's southeastern border. Since 1939, 7 earthquakes above magnitude 7.0 have ruptured the fault progressively from east to west, each earthquake potentially triggering the next by stress transfer. It's a zipper unzipping toward Istanbul. December 26, 1939. Erzincan. Magnitude 7.9 to 8.0. 30,000 deaths. Fault rupture 360 kilometers. This initiated the sequence. December 20th, 1942. Magnitude 7.1. 50 kilometers of fault. November 26th, 1943, Toshia. Magnitude 7.6. 280 kilometers ruptured. February 1st, 1944, Bolu Gareda. Magnitude 7.3. 165 kilometers. May 26th, 1957, magnitude 7, 30 kilometers. July 22nd, 1967, magnitude 7.1. The progression continued west. August 17th, 1999, 0302 local time. Izmit, magnitude 7.4. The earthquake struck at night. Epicenter 11 kilometers southeast of Izmit city. Depth 17 kilometers. The rupture produced 100 kilometers of surface break. Right lateral strike slip. Offsets up to 2.7 meters. The opposite side of the fault moved right. The quake lasted less than 1 minute, but devastated Turkey's most industrialized region. Izmit, Golchuk, Sakarya, Derika, Derince, near Istanbul. 17,000 deaths, over 50,000 injured, 250,000 homeless. 120,000 houses severely damaged. Many pancake collapses. Support column failure from poor construction. 23 billion USD in damage. Corruption allowed developers to ignore seismic standards. Buildings that should have survived didn't. Schools collapsed. Hospitals collapsed. The government revised codes in 2007, again in 2018. But enforcement remained spotty. In the years leading to 2018, the government offered construction amnesties, pay a fee, violations forgiven. 317,000 buildings in Istanbul took advantage of amnesties, according to the mayor in February 2023. 90,000 buildings face serious collapse risk. 3 months after Izmit, November 12, 1999, magnitude 7.2 struck Dusci. 110 kilometers east of Izmit, 845 deaths. The sequence wasn't finished. The East Anatolian Fault remained quiet longer. Then, February 6, 2023, 0417 local time, Kahramanmaraş region, magnitude 7.8, 17-kilometer depth, shallow. The rupture broke 3 southwestern segments of the East Anatolian Fault. 300 kilometers, left lateral motion. The ground displaced up to 10 meters in places. 9 hours later, the second earthquake. Magnitude 7.5 on the Surgu fault system, a cascading multi-fault rupture, backward fault branching. Something usually considered too dynamically unfavorable to occur in hazard models, but it happened. The death toll exceeded 50,000 in Turkey alone, another 6,000 in Syria, 56,697 total official count by late February. The 5th largest earthquake death toll in 2,000 years of Turkish history. Only 4 events killed more. Antioch in 115 CE, 260,000 deaths. Antioch in 25 CE, 250,000. Cilicia in 1268, 60,000. Izmir in 1883, 53,000 to 120,000. The 2023 earthquakes surpassed both the 1939 Erzincan quake and the 1990s. 9 Izmit quake. But the construction quality betrayed the victims. Modern buildings, only 10 years old, collapsed while older structures nearby stood. Building codes ignored. Inspections faked. The Turkish government knew. The mayor of Istanbul warned publicly. The risk was documented. Nothing changed. When it ruptures, models suggest 60 to 90,000 deaths. Thousands of buildings will collapse. The city's location in a sediment-filled basin will amplify ground motion. The earthquake is not a question of if, it's when. The Himalayan frontal thrust and main Himalayan thrust, the longest continental collision zone on Earth, 2,400 kilometers, where the Indian plate underthrusts the Eurasian plate at 4 to 5 centimeters per year. This collision builds the highest mountains on the planet. The Himalayas gain over 1 centimeter in height each year, but that vertical motion comes from horizontal compression, and when the compression releases, cities die. The main Himalayan thrust is a megathrust fault beneath the entire Himalayan arc. It's locked from the surface to 100 kilometers depth. That's 100 kilometers of fault that doesn't slip smoothly. It sticks. Stress accumulates. The convergence rate means 20 centimeters per year of movement that has to go somewhere. Some releases in small earthquakes, some in plastic deformation, but most stores as elastic strain. When that releases, magnitude 8 or higher. The fault has produced 4 great earthquakes in the last 125 years. April 4th, 1905. Kangra, Himachal Pradesh, magnitude 7.8, 20,000 deaths. January 15th, 1934. Nepal, Bihar, magnitude 8.0 to 8.4, somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 deaths. Exact toll disputed. August 15th, 1897. Meghalaya, Assam, magnitude 8.1. August 15th, 1950. Arunachal, Assam, magnitude 8.6. But large segments haven't ruptured in centuries. Seismic gaps. Epicenter. 21 kilometers north-northeast of Muzaffarabad in Pakistan. Administered Kashmir. Depth 10 kilometers. Shallow. The rupture occurred on a thrust fault within the collision zone. Ground shaking lasted 60 seconds. Triggered thousands of landslides across steep, unprepared terrain. 87,000 deaths. Over 86,000 in Pakistan. 1,350 in Indian Kashmir. Half the deaths in Pakistan were children. Schools collapsed during morning classes. 100,000 injured. 780,000 homes destroyed or severely damaged. 3 million displaced. Most casualties from collapse of unreinforced masonry structures. Stone buildings with heavy roofs, no seismic design. Traditional construction methods that worked for centuries failed when the ground accelerated beyond their capacity. Remote valleys inaccessible for days. Survivors froze. The earthquake destroyed transportation infrastructure. 6,000 road locations damaged. Bridges down. Helicopters couldn't fly in the weather. Aid arrived slowly. The economic damage exceeded 5 billion USD. Pakistan's government struggled. International assistance came, but coordination was poor. The area hadn't recorded major slip since the magnitude 7.6 earthquake of 1555. 450 years of accumulation. When it went, it released. But seismologists determined this wasn't the anticipated great earthquake for the region. A 2020 paper in Nature by Sridevi Jade identified another gap, a 250-kilometer stretch between Muzaffarabad and Kangra Valley. No major slip since 1555. High geodetic strain rate. Observed microseismicity. Probable future large earthquakes of magnitude 7.7. Kashmir seismic gap. Jammu. Ladakh. Millions at risk. 11:56 Nepal Standard Time. Gorkha, Nepal. Magnitude 7.8 to 7.9. Epicenter near Lamjung, about 80 kilometers northwest of Kathmandu. Depth 15 kilometers. The rupture occurred along the main frontal thrust segment. Compressional thrust faulting. The earthquake lasted 50 seconds. 8,962 deaths. 21,952 injured. 3.5 million displaced. Over 1 million buildings destroyed. Kathmandu Valley suffered heavy damage. Ancient temples collapsed. Dharahara Tower, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, destroyed. Only the base remained. Buildings not designed for seismic loads. Unreinforced masonry. Brick and mud mortar. Wooden frames that worked for small quakes failed in magnitude 8. The quake triggered landslides across the mountains. Avalanches on Everest killed 19 climbers and Sherpas. Villages buried. Rivers dammed by landslides, creating dangerous temporary lakes. The main shock was followed by a magnitude 7.3 aftershock on May 12th. More buildings collapsed. More deaths. More trauma. The 2015 earthquake released some of that. But the rupture stopped 11 kilometers beneath Kathmandu. It didn't break to the surface. The shallow section south of Kathmandu remains locked, still loaded. Capable of producing an earthquake of comparable size. Calculations show sufficient accumulated energy to produce magnitude 8. Seismologist Vinod Kumar Gore said in 2013, "I cannot say when. It may not happen tomorrow, but it could possibly happen sometime this century, or wait longer to produce a much larger one." In western Nepal, models suggest potential for magnitude 8.9. Return period over 1,000 years. But the accumulated moment deficit along the main Himalayan thrust equals 6.6 times 10 to the 19th Newton meters per year. That energy will release. Delhi, Kathmandu, Islamabad, Lahore, hundreds of millions live within the potential damage zone. Infrastructure is inadequate, buildings vulnerable. When the next great Himalayan earthquake strikes, the death toll could dwarf previous events. Modern population density in seismic zones that haven't ruptured in centuries. The math is terrifying. The collision zone between the African, Arabian, and Eurasian plates, stretching from the Azores through the Mediterranean, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, and into Southeast Asia. This isn't a single boundary, but a complex system of faults. The Mediterranean Arc, the Zagros Fold and Thrust Belt, the Makran Subduction Zone. Each segment has killed thousands throughout history, but recent events highlight ongoing danger. Caught between the African plate pushing north and the Eurasian plate, the Apennine Mountains form from this compression. Active normal faults run the length of the range. Extensional tectonics. As Africa pushes, Italy stretches and fractures. Earthquakes strike regularly. Amatrice lost 234 residents. The town center collapsed. Old unreinforced masonry, stone buildings built in medieval times. They'd survived centuries of smaller quakes. They couldn't survive this one. October 30th, 2016, magnitude 6.6. Norcia, more damage. November, December. Aftershocks continued. Over 60,000 events recorded in 6 months. The sequence demonstrated how normal faulting can produce sustained seismicity, each event adjusted to the new stress state. Italy lives with this. Historic buildings, cultural heritage sites, UNESCO landmarks, all vulnerable. Balancing preservation with safety remains impossible. Retrofit old structures or lose history. Do nothing and wait for collapse. Every earthquake is a test. The Arabian plate pushes into Eurasia at 2 to 3 centimeters per year. This creates the Zagros Mountains along Iran's western border. Thrust faults, fold and thrust belt, one of the most seismically active regions on the planet. Iranian cities built on this active collision zone have suffered repeatedly. The earthquake struck at night when people slept. BAM's adobe and mud brick buildings offered no resistance. 26,000 deaths, official count. Some estimates go higher, 30,000. The city of BAM, population of 100,000, lost a quarter of its residents. The ancient Arg BAM Citadel, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, collapsed. 2,000 years of history destroyed in seconds. It's a zone, a belt of deformation spanning thousands of kilometers. The 1999 Izmit earthquake, already covered. Turkey bridges the Alpide system. The 2023 Turkey-Syria earthquakes, East Anatolian Fault, same system. These events belong to the broader Alpine-Himalayan collision. The belt has killed more people throughout recorded history than any other tectonic feature, scattered across decades and countries, but the cumulative toll exceeds all others. The boundaries are mapped, the faults are known. GPS stations track plate motion in real time. Scientists can measure stress accumulation, calculate recurrence intervals, model rupture scenarios, forecast probable magnitudes. But they cannot predict when, not the day, not the year, sometimes not even the decade. Earthquakes don't announce themselves, they just come. Annualized losses on the west coast in the New Madrid seismic zone. Cascadia tops the list for potential financial risk. But globally, the deadliest plate boundaries remain subduction zones. The mechanics favor them. More area, deeper rupture. Longer duration, greater displacement, and if they're offshore, tsunamis. The Aleutian Trench produced a magnitude 8.6 earthquake in 1946. Tsunami hit Hawaii 5 hours later, 159 deaths. The Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, the Tonga Trench, the Manila Trench beneath the South China Sea, the Puisagur Trench south of New Zealand, all capable of magnitude 8 or greater, each threatens millions. The Cocos Plate subducting beneath Mexico and Central America. September 19th, 1985, magnitude 8.0 struck off the coast of Michoacan, Mexico. Mexico City, 350 kilometers from the epicenter, experienced devastating damage. 10,000 deaths. Sediment-filled basin amplified ground motion. Buildings resonated at the same frequency as the seismic waves. Pancake collapses. September 19th, 2017. Magnitude 7.1. Exactly 32 years later to the day, Puebla State. 369 deaths, more damage in Mexico City. The coincidence spooked survivors, but it was just that. Coincidence. Earthquakes don't follow calendars, they follow physics. They've always built. The risk was invisible for most of history. Now we know. We can see the plates moving, we can measure the accumulation. We've documented the history, but people still live in these zones. Economic forces, family, work, home. You can't evacuate millions permanently. You you can only prepare. Public education, regular drills. It means accepting the cost up front instead of paying exponentially more in lives and reconstruction after the inevitable disaster. Japan has invested, Chile has invested. New Zealand, after the 2010 and 2011 Christchurch earthquakes, has invested. The results show similar magnitude events in different countries produce vastly different death tolls based on preparation. Haiti versus Chile, 2010. Both magnitude 7+, 20,000 deaths versus 500. The difference is building codes, enforcement, awareness. Corruption allows shortcuts. Poverty limits options. Old buildings can't be replaced overnight. The vulnerable remain vulnerable. Civilizations rise and fall between great earthquakes. The boundaries just load and release, load and release. It's a cycle as old as plate tectonics. 4 billion years of this. It will continue long after humans are gone. But for now, we live on this planet. We live on these boundaries. 10 million in Cascadia, 15 million in Istanbul, 40 million along the Chile coast, 100 million plus in the Himalayan arc, 500 million around the Mediterranean and Alpine belt. The numbers are staggering. The potential death toll from future great earthquakes could exceed all historical events combined if multiple boundaries rupture in rapid succession. Climate change adds another layer. Sea level rise compounds tsunami risk. Glacial lake outburst floods in the Himalayas triggered by earthquakes threaten valleys downstream. Changing weather patterns complicate rescue operations. Storms during recovery, heat during displacement. The hazards multiply. Get people under tables. Japan's system saved lives in 2011. Mexico City has early warning tied to the coast. When shaking starts in Aceh or Michoacan, automated alerts go out. Sirens, phone messages, every second counts. Tsunami warning systems across the Pacific saved lives in 2011. The wave hit Japan with minimal warning, but Hawaii, California, Chile had hours. Evacuations worked. Deaths outside Japan were minimal. 1 in California, 4 in Indonesia. The system validated, but it requires maintained buoys, communication infrastructure, trained responders, informed populations. That takes investment. It takes political will. What's uncertain is how many. With preparation, building codes, early warning, and evacuation plans, a magnitude 9 earthquake might kill hundreds instead of hundreds of thousands. Without preparation, the toll climbs. The choice is political. Economic, social, not geological. The boundaries don't change their nature. Only human response determines the outcome. Archives in Pacific Northwest sediments. The tsunami deposit layer matched. The tree rings matched. The written record matched. This level of detail for an event 325 years old is remarkable. It proves the science works. Paleoseismology is real. Recurrence intervals are real. The patterns hold. The last one was 24 years ago. The segment is due, not overdue, just due, somewhere in the probable window. When it ruptures, if preparedness has improved, perhaps the death toll stays in the thousands. If not, 230,000 again. Or worse, population has grown, coastal development has expanded, Aceh rebuilt. But did it rebuild better? The North Anatolian Fault hasn't broken beneath the Sea of Marmara in 259 years, since 1766. Stress accumulates. The mayor knows. The government knows. Scientists have warned for decades. 317,000 buildings took construction amnesties, 90,000 at high collapse risk. When the fault breaks, those buildings will fall, the Bosphorus will shake, bridges might fail, the metro might flood. 15 million people in direct danger. Models suggest magnitude 7.2 to 7.6. Duration 60 to 90 seconds, 60 to 90,000 deaths. Unless retrofits happen, unless vulnerable buildings are raised, unless people evacuate the worst zones. But where do 15 million people go? The Japan Trench with 18,000 dead and 300 billion in damage. The Peru-Chile Trench producing magnitude 9.5. Cascadia waiting 325 years loaded and locked. The Anatolian Faults with over 150,000 dead across the last century. The Himalayan thrust system with over 150,000 dead in the last 20 years and hundreds of millions at risk. The Alpine belt spanning continents with death tolls scattered across millennia but totaling more than any other zone. Only how many? The boundaries continue moving. 4 centimeters, 7 centimeters, 9 centimeters per year. Every year that passes without rupture means more slip deficit, more energy stored, more violent release when it comes. A 2023 analysis of the Turkey earthquakes found that backward fault branching, previously thought too unlikely to model, occurred. The rupture propagated in ways considered dynamically unfavorable. Standard hazard assessments don't account for this. The models are incomplete. Earthquakes surprise us. They break rules. They cascade across multiple faults. They trigger other faults through stress transfer. The systems are more complex than the models. Risk is underestimated. Each layer represents a submarine landslide, each landslide triggered by an earthquake. The pattern shows events in 1766, 1660, 1509, 1479. Regular intervals. 100 to 150 years. We're past that now. 259 years since 1766. The fault is late. It's loaded beyond previous estimates. When it goes, the rupture might be larger than 1766. Magnitude 7.5 instead of 7.2. The difference is exponential. 10 times the energy, 10 times the shaking, 10 times the damage. The buildings aren't ready. The people aren't ready. The world will watch in real time as it happens. Social media will broadcast the collapse. Rescue robots will stream video from the rubble. The death toll will climb on live television, and then the investigations will start. Who approved those buildings? Who took the bribes? Who ignored the warnings? But by then it's too late. The dead are dead. The city is rubble. The survivors are traumatized. The economic loss approaches 1 trillion USD. Turkey's GDP is 800 billion. The country could collapse economically. Regional stability threatened. Refugee crisis. Humanitarian disaster. All from one earthquake that scientists have been predicting for 30 years. That's the reality of living on deadly plate boundaries. The science is clear. The warnings are explicit. The outcomes are modeled. But action lags. And people die. Again and again. In predictable locations, on predictable timescales. Following predictable patterns. The boundaries don't hide. They're mapped with centimeter precision. GPS measures their motion daily. Seismometers record every tremor. The data is public. The risks are known. Yet millions remain vulnerable. Because changing building codes is expensive. Because retrofit programs take decades. Because political will evaporates between disasters. Because people forget. Because life goes on until it doesn't. Loading the next earthquake, the next tsunami, the next disaster, the cycle continues. It has for billions of years. It will for billions more. We just happen to be here now, living on the boundaries, measuring, modeling, warning, waiting, hoping, knowing. The boundary doesn't care. It's just physics. Stress and strain, accumulation and release. The deadliest force on the planet. Not a virus, not a bomb, not a storm, an earthquake. And the 7 boundaries covered here have killed more people than all wars of the 20th century combined. They'll kill again. The only question is how many die next time. That depends on what we do now, before the shaking starts. Before the tsunami arrives. Before the buildings collapse. The choice is ours. The boundaries are just doing what boundaries do. We're the ones who chose to live here. We're the ones who build on active faults. We're the ones who ignore the warnings. We're the ones who decide if the next great earthquake kills hundreds or hundreds of thousands. The boundaries are indifferent. The outcome is on us.